One. All right, welcome everybody to the Your Best Self podcast, where I interview successful and or inspiring people just like Elysia Stobbe, who's going to share her story of how she made $1,000,000 and then lost it all again, and how she overcome all her challenges to end up becoming, the America's #1 mortgage authority, a Harvard speaker, and #1 best-selling author of her book, How to Get Approved for the Best Mortgage Without Sticking a Fork in Your Eye. That's also very important. So my name is Robert Hurt, and today I have the honor to interview Elysia Stobbe. Elysia, welcome to the interview. Welcome to the podcast. How are you feeling today?
Thanks, Robert. Thanks so much for having me. I feel great. Every day is a gift.
Awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. All right. So Elysia, please share a little bit about your background and where it all started.
Sure. So I started in marketing and radio sales. Mm-hmm. And I did well at that. I love people and I love numbers. So, if I can have some kind of work where I can do both and connect with people and get to work with numbers too, I'm kind of geeky like that, and that's okay. The world needs us.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, and then my second career, so I did well in that, and I started investing in real estate with the extra money I made in radio. And then I got into the mortgage industry. I thought, I love this real estate thing, but I don't really want to show houses. That's kind of not, I like to go look at houses, but I don't know that I want to take people around and, look at houses. So I got into the finance end of it, and I got in 2003, and everybody was kind of like, oh, that refi boom is done. What are you doing? And I was like, I think I'm going to do purchase. And then pretty much the U.S. had their largest purchase boom in years, and I did very well, and I kept investing, and then we had that big crash. So I ended up so at that time I had well over $1 million in assets in real estate.
Wow.
And I went from making almost $500,000 a year to 40,000.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that was a big lifestyle change. And I just really hunkered down. I stayed in mortgages. I just thought, all those sayings you hear, like when going gets tough, the tough get going. And then I also thought, if I can succeed in this time when there's no business, that eventually, everything's a cycle and it'll come back, that, then I'll be ahead of the game, because a ton of people got out of the industry at that time. So there was less competition. There was a whole lot less business, right?
Yeah,
so you didn't really need all the competition. But I just thought, all right. So I went from actually being a loan officer to opening a branch. So I kind of doubled down at the worst time possible. I think it was like 2008. And again, I was making, to me, not very much money at all. And I just thought, well, what can I do differently? What can I learn? And I just thought, well, first of all, I'm lucky to have my health, right? So that's the most important thing. And a lot of times, and so I had to short sell property. I had to sell property at a loss, because I actually owed more than I even owned at that point, because the real estate was upside down. And then there was a real estate, but I never went late. I never defaulted on a mortgage or anything like that. And part of that was, my ethics. And then part of that was, if I stay in the mortgage industry, I have to be a positive example. So, and then I lost a ton of assets in that crash also, because our stock market crashed, so I basically went from, eating whatever I wanted, out at restaurants whenever I wanted, to having sandwiches.
Yeah.
So I just had developed an appreciation for everything I had. And so I just learned to, love sandwiches again. And
I love that.
I got out eating steak. All right, this sandwich tastes pretty good. And I remember joking about it with friends in the industry, and we were all like, yeah, the sandwiches taste pretty good. So, and it's just amazing what you really take for granted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the bottom line is the majority of the world, I think it's like 98% of the planet, lives on $2 or less a day.
Yeah, exactly.
And in the United States, we're spoiled rotten,
True.
So what I thought that was like that measly $40,000,
Mm.
that's,
Still a lot.
it's a lot of money,
Yeah, it's a lot. Mm-hmm.
So I just hunkered down and I, like I said, ate sandwiches and
Mm-hmm.
didn't eat out. And uh, I just saved all my cash.
Mm.
And I definitely made a couple of mistakes, but I tried to learn from my real estate mistakes, and I just
Mm-hmm.
bought all my properties in cash.
Okay.
Because I was scared. Like it took me, 2 or 3 years
Mm-hmm.
to even have the savings to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I was so scared to get back in the market, but I
Mm-hmm.
just thought, well, if I'm not leveraged, people always need a place to live.
Yeah.
So I started buying more rental properties again.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we're overdue for a crash or a correction still now,
Mm-hmm.
but if those properties are paid for, then people still need a place to live, and that cash flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I diversified a little bit, and then I just kept going. I thought, let me let other people, benefit from my knowledge. So that's when I
Mm-hmm.
started working on my book.
Mm. Great.
And I feel like I'm no stranger to hard work. So, I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
wrote that book 2.5 years, nights and weekends, while I was
Two and a
still,
half years. Wow.
yeah, because I
That's a
still had
long time.
I was
Yeah.
still working on mortgages. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny
So,
because I told people I was working on it, and
mm-hmm.
I asked a few friends to proofread it, and they're like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this isn't like an ebook. This is a real
Yeah.
book."
This look
Books have
legit.
validity.
Uh-huh.
But I said, yeah, I mean, I really wanted to elevate the level of
Mm-hmm.
professionalism in the industry and empower
Mm-hmm.
consumers to be able to ask intelligent questions, because in the mortgage industry, we do this all day long, but
Mm.
for the most part, it's the largest, and it is the single largest investment anybody makes.
Mm.
And for the most part, people only do it 1, 2, maybe 3 times in their life, and they
Yeah.
actually spend more time researching buying a car.
True. Yeah. So it's a
Yeah,
very
and so
important decision to make, right? It's a very
yeah.
important one, and a lot of people are not educated to be making that kind of decision. So that's basically where you're coming, right?
Yep. So I just
Mhm.
tried to boil it down and make it as simple as possible for people to understand. And I really just came from a serving mentality of how can I help people
Mhm.
and, just explain it. So, so the book did really well. I was
Mhm.
super psyched. I kind of had a
Mhm.
strategy. There was a #1 bestseller in mortgages for like 10 years before
Wow.
mine.
Mhm.
But it wasn't written by somebody who was in the industry. They had never
Mhm.
originated a loan in their life. So I just thought,
Yeah. I
mine
can do
is
better than that.
better.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So my goal was twofold: one, to hit #1, but also to knock them out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, so when we launched the book, it went #2 in 24 hours, and I think
Wow.
like in a week it was #1. So it was
Mhm.
awesome. And then yeah, I was lucky that I got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, and then
Mm.
I just always try to empower people with knowledge. So when I got
Mhm.
invited to speak at Harvard, I jumped at the opportunity. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Wow.
that's a little bit of my struggle. It just
That's
takes
fantastic.
discipline, really. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's not rocket science to have a budget, but it is so hard
Mm.
to
Right.
discipline.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
now I can go eat out, but I still eat sandwiches.
Sandwiches are still good, right? Thank you so
They're
much for
great.
sharing. Yeah, I know. I love sandwiches as well. They're so simple, but as my girlfriend and I have been in Bulgaria, we have been eating sandwiches for like a week because it was just so delicious. Not because we couldn't afford anything else, but it was just so delicious. So, anyways, thank you so much for sharing the story. And there are a couple of learnings I think that people can take away from that. That at a hard time where you feel like the world is against you and everything is going south, that you are still we're seeking the opportunity and are looking for the lesson to learn. And where everybody thought that, all right, there's no business right now, you still thought about ways you could basically benefit from what was going on, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so that's amazing. And what of the other lessons that did you get to learn from this crash? Because obviously you now learned you need to diversify your assets.
Mhm.
That's something that you've learned. And what else did you learn from the situation where you basically lost all your assets? You went from making $500,000 in a year to $40,000. So what were some of the learnings there?
I think it's super important to never give up and
Mm-hmm.
realize that everything will change.
Mm.
Always. The only thing,
Uh-huh.
as scared as people are of change, that's really the only constant.
Yeah.
So you can either, be stuck in the moment that the economy's horrible and, it's scared about investing. And then really the opposite is true. Like when the economy's bad, if you have the cash, that's when you invest. The challenge is most people don't have the cash and they don't have the commitment or the stomach, right? It's really hard to have faith and be like, oh, it's really just a cycle and it's going to come back, right? So, but I think just, not stay stuck. If it's a great moment, stay stuck and appreciate it. If it's a bad moment, realize that this too shall pass.
I love that.
Just always believe in yourself, because it's really hard to make other people believe in you if you don't believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think like believing yourself is like the one single most powerful thing that you can do in order to, become great in life. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then everything that you do is basically destined to fail, because you're going in with the attitude, oh, it's never going to work out. I'll never be able to do that. Right. So basically everything you subconsciously do will end up not being the result that you actually want to have. Right. And how are you, coping with the fear? Because that's something you have talked, a little bit already, especially like in the situation just like that. You just lost everything. What can happen. You can see, the very bad, things that might happen. And you obviously said you were afraid to reinvest again and get back onto the market. So you said everything is going to change. Yes. But were there something else that's, other things that you have been doing in order to cope with that fear?
Sure. So I think there's two parts to that, really. For me, I knew I just kept saving and I just kept running the numbers, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to make the same mistake where I'm leveraged. So people will always need a home. And I thought that, so logically, it made sense, but I was also still scared because I had that fear. And I just thought, you know what, I can go through life being scared and worried that this isn't going to work, or, I can just move forward. And if I make another mistake, I make another mistake, but I would rather live and learn from my mistakes than be scared to make another one.
Yeah.
Because we're all human.
We all make mistakes, right?
Yeah. And if you look at the successes of true entrepreneurs, like Milton Hershey, who started, Hershey, now it's Hershey chocolate. He went bankrupt 9 times.
Wow.
Before he actually made money on the caramel. So the caramel is really what he made his money on, and then he became chocolate.
Yeah.
And then I really believe if you just, just like the name of your podcast, if you be your best self, that has a lot to do with kindness to other people, compassion for other people, giving back. And actually, just to talk about the Milton Hershey example again, he actually, during the Great Depression, since he was making all the money in the town, he actually built homes and a whole community for all the people that were making him wealthy at his caramel chocolate factory. And he gave back and started an orphanage, and that orphanage still has a legacy today. So I believe that if you believe in yourself and you do the right thing, I mean, we all have, well, I hope we all have a conscience, but if you're really operating from what's best, for the community, for the greater good, silly stuff like I don't throw litter on the ground. If I see litter on the ground, I pick it up. There are cities in America that are full of litter. I mean, so I don't know where those people's consciences are. Or they don't, care about the environment, but and I also believe that leading by example is very powerful. And that you can have a ripple effect in the most positive way, whether it's big or small, if you are your best self as much as you can be, right? We're all human. We make mistakes.
Exactly.
We have bad days. We get grumpy or whatever.
Exactly.
But if you're conscious about it and catch yourself and always try to improve just that little bit of shift that we can all make, then that's just the way you move forward consistently, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, people think you're going to have some big, and there are definitely times when you have a big epiphany or a big shift, but it's
it
really
starts,
the little daily habits.
Exactly.
You know, like I get up and meditate, and the days that I do that, I have better days. The days that I forget or I'm rushed or I didn't, the days just generally, those days are not as good. So it's like, okay, I just, you know, and so if I do it 5 days out of 7 or 6 days out of 7, or, you know, you just consciously trying to push the needle forward.
I love that. Yeah. And I totally agree with that because, you know, when, like, let's go back to failing and being afraid to fail, making mistakes. I think that a lot of people do not realize that it is part of the process, and it's part of the process of growing, right? Because probably not a single successful person out there has never, ever failed in his life. So, you know, once people realize that failure and making mistakes and feeling pain is sort of needed in order to grow and make progress in life, you know, once you see, you know, it in that kind of perspective, it will be way easier to go out and do things because, you know, it is just part of the game, right? You need to do that. And once you can actually be willing to fail, right? Once you go out there and you're like, all right, you know, not go out there and say like, all right, I want to fail right now, but being okay and being comfortable with failing and making mistakes. I believe that having that kind of mindset will definitely, you know, get you way, way further than, you know, being stuck in your little bubble and being afraid to make a mistake and feeling judged and all of that. So I totally agree with you that, you know, this is very, very powerful, a very powerful mindset to have. Yeah.
Well, and if you think of like babies, Robert, right?
Yes.
If a baby, the first time a baby was learning to walk, if they fell down and didn't get up again, none of us could walk.
Exactly. So it's part of the game, and, you know, people got to just realize that. And we've been also talking about leading by example, right? Like, have you had a few examples or role models that you have been following during your hard time, basically?
Oh, sure. I'm a great fan of Tony Robbins, and I'm one of his senior leaders now.
Oh, true. You actually have been learning from him, right?
Yeah. So for years, like I went to his first event, and I was just like, I hadn't read a book or anything. Like they came to our office and sold tickets, and I was like, the first time they came, none of us could go, and I was like, all right. So they came 2 years later, and I thought we should go. So I took some members on my team, and I went to the event, and I was just like, wow, this is the best Kool-Aid ever. How much can I get? Awesome. And yeah, it was a huge stretch for me. So I invested in his platinum program for several years. And I mean, you talk about being uncomfortable and doing it anyway. Financially, I mean, other than buying a house, it was the biggest chunk of money I'd ever spent on myself, more than my college education.
Yeah.
So again, I was terrified. But I just thought, you know, if it doesn't work out and I lose everything, well, I already went there. So I know how to do it again. I know I can recreate success. And then it just had huge shifts in my life that I never, like before I signed up, if somebody would said, oh, you're going to be a #1 best-selling author and you're going to speak at Harvard, I would have been like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So Tony Robbins is an amazing inspiration to me. And then there are just so many people. I just feel fortunate. I mean, there's people locally that, you know, I have a friend of mine locally that he's one of the people that helped me launch my book and be successful. And I didn't know him. He was like a friend of a friend. And I said, hey, who has a successful book? I'd like to learn from them. And oh, they said, you should talk to Wally Conway. He's a friend of mine now. We've known each other for years. And it's pretty interesting because he put me through his screening process. So he said, yeah, I'm happy to meet with you. Come to my office in 3 weeks at 7 a.m. And I was like, okay, I feel like that's a test and I don't care. That's fine. He's going to share his knowledge. And it really was his like test because he feels like if you're not willing to show up that early, then you're probably not going to really use the information he's going to share. And he didn't want to waste his time either. So
I love that.
Yeah. So many people I feel like have been generous to me in terms of, and just giving me an opportunity. Like it was a friend of mine in that Tony community actually that said, hey, we're putting together some speakers at Harvard. are you interested? And I said, of course. And at that time, I didn't even have a book. Actually, I hadn't finished my book. And then since then, I've been back to speak again. So I feel like, you know, you have to, it's kind of like you make your own luck, but you have to work hard too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, there's so many people. Oh my gosh. Like, I mean, my mom always told me when I was little, just do what you love and the rest will follow, whether that's success or money, but you have to follow your heart. And I think, you know, there's just so many people. I just try to learn whatever I can from whoever I can.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So.
And I also love that, the advice of do what you love, because I believe that when we all do what we love, we can be our true authentic self. And when we can be that, we will attract the things that will help us grow and expand and do the things that we actually want to do. Right. Because if we, like, for me personally, I know that feeling of doing something, but not really being able to stand behind that, because there's, this little thing that feels off. It just doesn't feel right. That what you do right now, because you can't really, identify yourself with that long term. And now, since I started, the Your Best Self YouTube channel and also the podcast, I just feel so much more happier and engaged, and I feel like this is the right, path to go. And once you find that, I feel like, you're going to be so much more energized, and you will wake up in the morning, you're going to be so excited to be working on this thing, because, this is what you want to do. This is what you love. And I hope that a lot of people find out what it is they love. I think this is not an easy task to do, obviously, and I think that a lot of people will need to go through and fall down a lot of times before they can finally find out what it is that they want to do in life. But once they do that, that's going to be very powerful and a very big epiphany that they're going to find out, oh, I love doing that. So just continue doing that. So yeah. I love the advice.
I couldn't agree more with you, Robert. And it's true, because people know if they're really living their passion or not. Right? It's in the back of your mind somewhere that it's just like there's something off. And sometimes it's just a little shift, and sometimes it's a huge shift. But I mean, I do think we're all on this planet to be our best selves and contribute and make a positive difference. And, so many people are either afraid, or they feel trapped, or they're tied to a paycheck, or the golden handcuffs, or whatever you want to call it. But, it's just so liberating to just follow your heart and do what you want to do. And it's interesting, because I grew up with that. Like I said, it's my mom that told me that, but really, I don't think I always followed it.
Yeah, absolutely. It just takes time.
Yeah. And it is scary.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I mean, for me as well right now, like, at the beginning, obviously it doesn't produce the results that you at some point want to see, but you just, got to stay with it. And, if you follow your heart and you do what you love, at some point, as you also said, right, all the things, all the results, money, inspiration, impact is going to be a byproduct of your, efforts that you put in, day out. So totally agree with that. So we have been talking a little bit about examples, in person, and you mentioned, Tony Robbins and learning from his platinum program. Would you say that this was, one of the most shaping time of your lives, or was there an event that was the most shaping, in your life, next to perhaps the crisis or the crash that happened?
Yeah, so actually I was at Tony Robbins' event, the second event I went to after I signed up. To drink all the Kool-Aid, and it's this event called Date with Destiny.
Oh yeah.
And he basically reprograms your blueprint, because we all have a blueprint of what we think we want or what we think makes us happy. And if what you're doing doesn't line up with that, it's pretty tough to do it. So Tony has this amazing program, and I remember sitting in that program, and at that point, like, it was a stretch for me, but financially I had definitely started to recover. So I was, again, I felt like financially secure. Wasn't financially free yet, but secure still. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, that's great, but I'm miserable. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, I'm a grumpy person. And I mean, it was a huge epiphany for me And then I really didn't know what to do, but that's the great part about the program. And then I put all the pieces together, but literally like I came home and like kind of just blew up my business because I love helping people in the mortgage industry. And now I coach and I just love that 10 times more. That's really what inspires me because I can change people's lives. And you know, it's great to get somebody a house, but if you can help somebody be financially free or financially secure and have more time to spend with the people they love, it's so amazing. But I remember coming home and being like, oh my gosh, like I don't like to do this part of the industry at all, or this part of the job, or I don't like running this piece of the branch. And so I basically like redid everything. Wow. And then the next program I went to was Business Mastery. And I did it all over again, even more specific in the business. And then it was just that whole first year journey, really, because I remember being in Business Mastery 2 in Fiji with Tony. And he was like, okay. And that was like 9 months after Business Mastery and probably 10 or 11 months after that Date with Destiny program. And to me, I'd never even had a life shift of like, what makes you happy. Right. Like it never. So the shift in me was huge, but I also remember sitting in Business Mastery and Tony was like, okay, well, who's increased, you know, since the last one 9 months ago, who's increased your, you know, revenue or profits or whatever by 5%? And people are raising their hand, 10%, 15%. And he keeps going like 100%. My hand went down after 15%. And I was like, I was so competitive also. I was like,
oh no.
What? Okay. All right. I can learn from them. You know, but I remember thinking I felt like I'm missing something. And then I realized I was like, oh my gosh. So yes, my main business was up 15%, but I'd started 2 other companies with the real estate investing and then another company that were successful. And I was like, oh, well, that's exponential. You can't measure it because it's 0 to whatever money. But the biggest shift, what sunk in was, okay, well, before I started on that journey, I had probably been out of the office or on vacation 10 days out of the year max. Because in America, we're super conditioned to work all the time, work 24/7, to be tied to our phones. Quality of life is not high. It's just not for most people, unfortunately, you know. And sitting in that chair in Fiji, I was like, I've been out of the office for 100 days this year. Wow. I've been to South Africa, Fiji, LA. I mean, I was like, oh my God, forget the money. I got a life. Like I really felt like, and I'm happy. And you know, before where I was like, oh my God, I'm miserable. And then I'm like, wow. So those are probably the 2 biggest shifts.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think
and it kind of happened unconsciously, right? You were kind of like working on it all the time, but you didn't really realize that you are making such a significant progress, right? And how did it feel like the first time you realized, like, oh my God, like I'm actually very far ahead since the last time I have, you know, thought about that?
Yeah, it was huge because I mean, I literally sat in that chair and I was like I went from being all competitive to having this big revelation. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, this is amazing. I mean, it was life-changing for me. And then also it's just, you know, again, we're all doing, going. You know, I think probably one of my more recent shifts in the past year has also been just to be.
Yeah, just be present in the moment, right?
Yeah, and be connected and be with the people you're with. And it's interesting because once you make that shift, you notice when other people aren't.
Yeah, they're
right?
like so
they're
awesome.
Like, so they're in a conversation with you and they're waiting because they want to say something, but they're not hearing what you're saying now because they're thinking of what they want to say.
Yes.
Right? And you can tell.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So
that's I guess something that a lot of people need to learn, how to listen properly, because as you said, most people listen in order to reply all the time, and they're like, while they're listening, they're already preparing, all right, what am I going to say, what am I going to say, what am I going to say, and that way they aren't really paying that much attention to the details that the other person is saying, and you can sense that obviously as well. But I think that this is something that people that start learning about themselves and going to personal development and taking coaching and going to seminars and all of that, this is what you get to learn throughout time, right? Because I believe that a lot of people, I don't know why, but a lot of people, well, I do know why people do not like to sit down and learn and personally develop themselves, because sometimes it's scary, it's tough, it's you don't want to know what your weaknesses are. You don't want to know what mistakes you are making, but it's necessary, right? Only when you reflect and, figure out, where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, what do I want to do, where have I failed in life, what can I learn from those mistakes? Only then you can actually, make significant progress. So, but I guess that's something that a lot of people still need to find out, sort of like what their approach is to this whole personal development space, because it's a growing market, right? There are like so many coaches in today, and so much personal development content, and I love that there is this shift where people consciously realize, all right, I sort of need to figure that out. Perhaps I will start meditating, because people find out that it's actually helping, right? And I'm very happy to see that. Like, I started, personally developing myself very early on. It also came from my parents, and I'm very grateful and happy that I started so early on. And I'm just like oftentimes joking with my little brother, who is 10 years younger than I am, that he's going to be a millionaire by 18, because right now he's 14, and he's already starting to question a lot of the things, and I'm already starting to, now he wants to start reading books. And I find that amazing, because when he starts, at 14, the things that I started with like 19 then, or like 20, then he's going to be way ahead of a lot of, his, people or his students like in his class. So I'm very happy to hear that as well. Awesome. And, next to coaching and, next to other examples, have you been reading a lot of books during that time, or was coaching the main way you've been learning?
Oh, I love to read. I've always loved to read since I was a kid. So I feel like there's a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I love that book because it's interesting, because he actually addresses the uncomfortable ness.
Okay, uncomfortable.
Yeah. So there's the zone of genius too. But he's and I'm totally paraphrasing, but I mean, there's a part in the book where he talks about, if you're having whatever angst with somebody else, there's two things, right? It's all about you, really. It's a trigger in you. And then his theory or position is that it's an opportunity for growth. So if you just sit with the uncomfortableness, which we're not trained to do, right? Like as humans, we have a 2 million year old mind. So we're used to running from that tiger. If we feel uncomfortable, we're out of here, right? So we do the same thing with our emotions. Like, we stuff down our sadness, or we don't take enough time to celebrate our successes and joys and wins. So anyway, so that book's phenomenal, because, just sit with it and see what else comes through.
Yeah.
It's really quite amazing. And then there's a piece in there too, which really just at the end, the very small part of the book, where he talks about time, like how you shift time. And that was huge for me. I mean, the rest of the book was great, but I feel like this little tiny part about time was like monumental for me, because I used to be, I mean, it's funny because I'm kind of a cross between type A and a hippie. So, but I would still get stressed about things and stressed about time, or I don't have enough time. And that's really just fear, right?
Yeah.
And I read that book, and it was like, I don't get stressed about time anymore. Like everything happens like it's supposed to happen. And so,
that's fantastic.
Pretty amazing.
How was the book called again? The Big Leap?
The Big Leap. Yeah. LEAP.
By whom?
Gay Hendricks. Yeah. GAY Hendricks.
Okay.
HENDRI. I think it's
fantastic.
CK.
All right. I will definitely find it on Google.
Yeah, it's fun.
some of the other books, have you also have, a few that you can recommend? Like, I always love to ask this question of, no, if you could recommend, up to 3 books for a person that is just starting out, personally, like he wants to personally develop, he wants to get into the best possible state, financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. What would be the 3 books that you would recommend this person to start reading?
So it's interesting because physically, I like Body by Science, which a friend of mine recommended. And one of the things I always take into consideration now, not in the past, is where that source is coming from, right? So the crux of the book is fascinating. It's all like it's all front loaded with scientific data, which for me, I was like, it's hard for me to get through, but the concept is very unique in that you actually only need to work out like once every 7 days, but there's a very specific sequence, and the whole thing takes usually less than 20 minutes. So and then you go to less and less, like, so you can work out once every 3 weeks.
Interesting.
So it's kind of like that sounds like a bunch of, that's not true. But I looked at this, I considered the source, and it was my friend Christian, and he has an amazing body. And I was just like, he has the swimmer's V, and you know what I mean? So I was like,
there might be something to it.
So I was like, he's like, well, and same thing I say, I'm like, don't believe me, go research it on the web. So, and he said, he basically explained it. And I was like, oh, what's the book? And I bought the book and I read the book, and it works. It's phenomenal.
Wow. That's I gotta check that out, because I think that's a lot, for a lot of people, that's a dream, to be working out like once a week or once every 3 weeks and have like a fit body. I think that's, something a lot of people want to do, and especially with people that, are so busy that they don't have any time, right? That they don't have time to be working out, which I think, is not true. You will always find, 10, 15 minutes a day to be doing a little bit of exercise. So that book might be fantastic for those people.
Well, and I don't think it should replace like the 10 or 15 minutes that you walk outside. Get fresh air, go to the beach, take off your shoes, ground with the earth. Like, those things are all important too. But if you have a goal of physically staying fit, then I suggest at least reading the book.
Awesome.
And then financially, there are 2 books I think that are helpful. And I read tons of entrepreneur books. Like Russell Brunson just came out with the, if you lost everything in 30 days, how would you?
I need to read that. That. Is it good?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Awesome.
So it's basically they asked for the stories of people on the 2 Comma Club. And if they had to start over from scratch, what would they do in the first 30 days with no money? Like, basically, so it's amazing and it's inspiring. And not only is it all these different sources of genius, but I love the different personalities in the book, because it's men and women both, and very different. And it's entertaining as well as enlightening, I think.
Awesome.
So that's one of the newer ones. But then, I read Robert Kiyosaki's book on cash flow. His books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Cash Flow Quadrant. And I think they're explained in fairly simple terms. And it addresses early on trading time for dollars versus having your money work for you. So that's a great book too. It's not like it's a new bestseller or anything.
Old books,
the principles work. The Millionaire Next Door is a great book. The Wisest Man in Babylon is a great book. And it all comes back to like a lot of those last 2. It talks about budgeting, living within your means. So those are great. And there's just so many. I may not read all the
fantastic books. And I love that. Like, I started reading books probably like 3 years ago, where I really went into that. And the first book I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
I love it.
Yeah, and it was such an amazing book, and it just hooked me into this whole person development and, learning about yourself and, being a good communicator and all of that, that I started reading books. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. I'm learning so many great new things, and it's just so much fun to basically live every single day and apply those, things, and see that, your mind is shifting, you are way happier, you are more energetic, more productive. And, it just goes to show as well, right? Because all of a sudden when you start talking to people, they're like, what's different? Like, you are kind of different. Like, what's going on here, right? So that's also, a fun reaction to have. And as you also said, sometimes it goes back to those old school books, right? Because that's also what I love. It doesn't need to be this new hot bestseller, because most of the, ancient wisdom basically is still being able to found in a lot of old books. Right. So like the current book that I'm personally reading is called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which is also by Robin S. Sharma. It's also an absolutely amazing book, which, also goes way back to 2003, I think. And still, like, all the things that you get to learn from these old school books, I would say, is still relevant today and will be relevant in, 100, 200, 500 years from today as well. Right. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing, your book recommendations. I will definitely link all of them in the description down below. And I'll also leave your book in the description down below. So if anybody, wants to check out, something about mortgages, then definitely Elysia will be able to help you with that. So we've been also talking right now, that's something that I wanted to ask you, is starting all over again, right? If you lost everything, start over again. Also a question I would like to ask is, with everything now, if you had the chance to kind of go back to a certain point in your life, what would you do differently? Is there something you would do differently, or would you do everything, the same in order to be here? Or is there something you would do?
I think I would probably take a year off after college and just travel the planet. As I love to travel. And even though my family, we didn't travel a ton, but growing up, we traveled a little bit. But I just love it so much. And I love meeting new people and learning about other cultures, and their rituals. And I went to South Africa and it changed my life. And that was only in 2013. So I would have, if I could have started traveling more earlier, that's probably what I would have done a little bit differently.
Yeah. That's
I make up for it now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what happened in Africa that changed your life in 2013?
It was just so amazing. I went it was actually a Tony Robbins Platinum trip, and I went on the trip because I've always wanted to dive with the great white sharks.
Oh, nice.
Like since I was little, like 8, 9, 10. So like when they announced this trip, oh my gosh, I was ran with
gotta go.
Sign up. And that part was amazing. But the other part was meeting the people, and just the people in South Africa. And it goes back to that, 98% of the planet lives on $2 a day. We did charity work with this orphanage. And not only were all the people that we met amazing, kind, engaged, and again, it's just, I feel like in America, we put this huge emphasis on work, and work's important. Yeah. But it's not your whole life. And I feel like it's, as a society, one of the mistakes we can definitely make. And they don't do that, in my opinion, in South Africa. So we did this charity work and spent time with this orphanage and with these children. And they go to school at this orphanage, and if they don't have, they feed them one meal during the day, but if they don't have a plate to put the food on, they don't get food. So we donated plates and bowls, and we did a lot of work rebuilding the orphanage and things like that. But these are kids that may not eat every day. Since then they do, and they still were happy and joyful and appreciative. And each of them spoke, there's different dialects of the different tribes. And so each of them spoke multiple languages, which I mean, that blew me away.
Yeah.
But just they were so genuine and appreciative of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, on my worst day, I have 100 times more than those kids. And that
Yeah.
was also part of that shift to
Mm-hmm.
really appreciating, you know, how spoiled I actually am.
Yeah.
And just, you know, and so it's funny because on the way home, people, you know, on the airplane were, you know, frustrated or annoyed about this and that. And just, I
Mm-hmm.
never, ever since then, I just, like, there's really not much I need to get frustrated about ever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
ever. So it
That's
was
fantastic.
life changing. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
amazing to just truly see. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think also travel is great,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you, you know, a greater appreciation for other
Yeah.
cultures besides your own that's ingrained. And it gives you a chance to appreciate and
Mm-hmm.
notice all the gifts that we take for granted in our
Mm-hmm.
own.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely agree. And it puts just life in this such a different perspective, right? Because now you see where you are and you know how sometimes bad you have it, but you know, as you said, like your worst days are still like 100 times better than what, you know, other people in third world countries have to deal with every single day. And they still get to appreciate every single little thing and they're happy and they don't worry about a lot of the stuff. And it's just crazy that so many people of us like do not appreciate and do not like they take life way too granted and all the stuff that we have around us, all the materialistics and just you know, if you're sitting at home and you have a computer in front of you, you have Wi-Fi access, you have a roof over your head, you perhaps have a drink next to you, you should be thankful for that and you should be grateful for having that because this is not normal. Like this is a privilege to have, you know, so to speak. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree that traveling, I personally love to travel as well. And we just have been traveling for 8 weeks with my girlfriend through Thailand and Indonesia. And
oh wow.
also saw obviously a lot of things and you know seeing how far we were able to get with what we would be making here and what kind of living standard we have been having there and for how little they work and provide such a great service, it blew me away. It absolutely blew me away and it just like put so much things into perspective that we are like, you know, we complain about like those minor small little things that in the end don't really matter. And, you know, they have like 15-hour shifts and they make like $200 a month. And you're like, how? Like how? So guys, appreciate what you have, you know, sitting at home, you know, in a warm, comfortable place. That's definitely, you know, something that's, you know, I would love for a lot of people to understand and to appreciate, you know, what they have right now. Amazing. So,
It's
Elysia.
interesting. I'll tell you real quick. It's
Mm-hmm,
funny
go ahead.
because I didn't have hot water at my house
Mm-hmm,
for a while. Like, I don't know, a few weeks. And,
mm,
you know, they were working to fix it. And, you know, I just would mention, like, not often, but, you know, and people would be like, oh my God, that's awful. And I'm like,
yeah. Is
no,
it?
I still have running water. So if
Mm-hmm.
I want to shower at home, it's cold, but
Yeah.
I really just go to the gym and shower. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a gym membership. I have a car to get
Mm-hmm.
to the gym. I have, you know, I don't even have to take the bus if I don't want,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
and if you really break down how many things you can, like, instead of like focusing on that negative, I
Mm-hmm.
broke it into like 10 positives. So
Yeah.
way happier to focus on
Mm-hmm.
that than, you know, the one thing with the hot
Yeah.
water, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry to interrupt.
That's a great no that's a great exercise. I think that you know I haven't like obviously I you know have thought about like turning the negatives into the positives, but you know just for the people out there that are sitting and probably you know are thinking or complaining about something stupid and you know negative in their life, you know just think about 10 things that are positive, 10 things that you can be grateful for right now. And I think once you do that, you will be just so much happier in your life and basically have just a more you know quality life in general. So absolutely love that exercise. So Elysia, we are slowly getting to the end of the interview, but also you know a question that I'd love to ask is like if you could teach the entire world like one single concept, one mindset, one exercise, you know one thought process in order to be changing or having a positive impact on the entire world, what would it be?
So it's a great question. I went to Sedona for the first time. I've always wanted to go last fall,
Mm-hmm.
and I was hiking in the Red Hills,
Mm-hmm.
and I came upon this man who was singing and playing guitar like on the top of this little, butte.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I was in the vortex also. So, and he had taken these chunks of red rock and carved them into hearts. And he was just giving them out. And every time he gave one to me and my friends. And he said, he gave us the heart and he said, feel the love, be the love, spread the love.
I love that.
I just thought, okay.
Oh, wow.
It's so amazing. Simple and so beautiful. And it's really easy if you just focus on that. And it comes from the outside in and then goes back out just like a beautiful circle or, infinity loop.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Do you still have the heart? Do you still have the heart that you...
I was so excited about the heart, and then not even a week later, I was telling somebody the story, and they loved the heart, and I gave it away.
Oh, well, but that's also nice.
Yeah. So I spread the love. I thought, okay, here,
that's awesome, right? And perhaps they have spread the love as well and gave the stone to somebody else. I think that would be amazing if at some point perhaps this stone or some kind of stone will get back to you, and you're like, hey, I started that. Like I had this impact first. Right, that would be amazing. That's lovely.
That's the ripple effect because it started with actually the guy in Sedona.
Exactly. So, every little action that you take on a day-to-day basis can have a huge impact on the world, in a big, like sometimes we don't even realize how big of an impact we can have. And that's also something that I got to learn fairly on, in my online journey is that, sometimes things that to you seem so common sense is not that common for a lot of other people. And just like a very simple piece of advice that for you is just like normal behavior can actually change somebody else's life, right? And I love, hearing from people that, applied some piece of advice that I have given, in one of my Facebook lives or in one post or something, and that they said, hey, this truly helped me to overcome XYZ, challenge that I had. And I'm like, really? That simple piece of advice? Right. And that's kind of like the ripple effect, as you said, right? Every little thing, at some point might come back to you and it will come back like, 100-fold basically. So that's fantastic. I love the story with the heart and, spreading the love, being the love and sharing it. So thank you for sharing that. And I would love, and I think that is also, a great way to end this podcast with love. So is there anything else you would love to share with the audience here? I will definitely make sure to leave your book in the description down below. And yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love your whole vibe and the,
thank you.
The concept of the be your best self. I just think it's amazing and I really applaud what you're doing, Robert. So awesome. Thank you for having me and keeping it up. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this interview, let me know in the comments down below, and also make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever I upload a new video, and also come up with a Your Best Self podcast. So Elysia, thank you so much for being on an interview today. I really enjoyed it, and I think that a lot of people got a lot of value from this interview, and I'll make sure to leave a little snippets that I can share on social media as well. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.